I'm really glad that you're here again with me, and I hope you enjoy this next video. I wanted to let you know that as a real estate professional for 37 years, started in 1986 in Connecticut, I've always been a student of my industry. I've always been someone who paid attention to what was going on. I've always watched interest rates, even going back into the days which it was much more difficult to do because it was not all on technology. You had to actually do different types of research, but I've always done that. And I think it's made me a better realtor. 20 years in management, did my best to make sure that the people that I worked with were educated on what the changes were. I wanted everybody to stay ahead of what was happening. And we've got a lot going on right now. There's major things happening in our industry, potentially creating massive change. So I am hopeful that this video with my dear friend, Saul Klein, someone we've known each other for decades, and I adore him. To me, he's kind of a sage in the industry. He's been around so long. He's always been a student. He's got more experiences and stories than I ever will have. And we were just hanging out, two buddies chatting with each other about what do we see happening, what's going on with the business, what does it look like looking. And we also really, which was fun for me, we went back into the history of when sub-agency went away and MLS offers of compensation and agency relationships were created. And it goes back a long time. And we talked about that because I think at some level, if you have a better understanding of what history is, you're better equipped to deal with the future is. So we just spent about 30 minutes chatting, talking about everything. I hope you enjoy it. And most importantly, I hope that you learn that you have to pay attention to what's going on in the business. So I hope you enjoy the video. Well, I'm excited, everybody who's watching. I'm very excited to have another opportunity to talk to one of my favorite human beings on the planet, my friend Saul Klein. We've known each other for a very long time. We've both been in the business a very long time. And because of Saul's experience and the things he's done and the positions he's taken and his absolute depth of need/desire to stay ahead of the curve instead of catching up and always be that one step ahead in terms of what's happening in our industry, being a student of the industry all the time, being a crusader for the industry all the time, I think that I felt very strongly that what was going on in our industry needs to have another conversation with my buddy Saul. So thank you again, my friend, for spending some time with me. I think this is thing 3. And I'm just grateful that you're willing to chat. And I want to open this up by talking about, we both know, because we've talked about it, that we've got a lot of things happening in our industry. I think the way I look at this, we have a lot of things aimed at our industry. Now, we both know people have been shooting at our industry forever, but I think that the things that are going on right now at a fragmental level are game changers. And so I want to chat with you about that. It is April of 2023. We have had a more recent additional class action certified against blah, blah, blah. And I just want to chat with you about it, Saul. So be the sage that you are and talk a little bit about where you think things are. If my viewers, my listeners have not paid attention to other videos we've done, talk about a little bit about what's happened, where it stands, and some of the foundations, if you don't mind, because you've got more history even than I do. And so share a little bit about that, if you don't mind, my friend.
Well, I'll start and then we'll go from there, Jen. It's great to be here. It's great to talk to you. And I know you're on the road a lot. And so be able to schedule something when you're back in San Diego, that's terrific.
Yep.
And so since the last time we spoke, this case, an antitrust consumer civil side case against major brokerage, major franchises, and the National Association of Realtors and MLSs.
Mm-hmm.
And the case is now referred to as Moeller versus the National Association of Realtors, was certified for class action. And so this was a case where sellers were claiming that there's price fixing and conspiracies to price fix because agents representing buyers didn't negotiate commissions, that it was the agents representing the sellers based on this rule in the NAR handbook, MLS handbook, which with this rule that we refer to as broker compensation. So what holds an MLS together? One of the things that we've always said is one of the three legs of the MLS stool was an MLS is an offer of compensation. And that why would competitors bring their buyers and sellers together if there was no offer of compensation? And so this rule in the MLS, this offer of compensation, was challenged. It's been almost 4 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And recently it's attained this higher level, this
Mm-hmm.
class action level, and damages are estimated in the billions of dollars,
Mm-hmm.
which could harm brokerage firms, franchisors, organized real estate, and not only from this case, but from cases that would spring from this case.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right. And so one of the things that we know, and we deal with this all the time, is that it's almost like it doesn't matter how big an issue is. A lot of our friends in the industry just aren't aware of it. They're not aware of the details. They want to think that nothing ill will come of it. And then they're surprised one day when something ill comes of it, right?
And let me jump in on that. That's probably, I'm on the road, and you're right. I just got back from Nebraska. Last month I was in South Dakota. I experienced snow for the first time in a while, my friend. And when I am standing in front of a group of students, and when I was in Nebraska, I had 200 people in the room for code. And when I asked the question, how many of you are aware? And I didn't go into too much detail. It was kind of a superficial question. But what I have found historically to be the case is it's anywhere from 1% to 5% of a room, no matter the size of the room, that say, yeah, I've heard about it. Well, heard about it and understanding it are two vastly different things.
Yeah, absolutely. So you take this issue of agents and brokers being comfortable that if they show another broker's listing,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
If you take that away, then what guarantee is there for somebody who has a buyer prospect? What guarantee is there for them that they're going to get paid? And the answer is, if the MLS isn't structured to offer that, absent a contract between the buyer and the agent that's working
Correct.
with them, absent that, there's no guarantee of compensation.
Correct. And that's a thing that you and I've talked about in the past, that at some level, had there been a stronger direction of, and we talked about this in the 90s, Saul, had there been a stronger direction of listing a buyer like you listed a seller and discussed all of those issues, and you had a contractual client relationship with the buyer, like you would have a contractual relationship with the seller under most circumstances, then frankly, it would have been clearer.
Yes, exactly. So, and the industry's evolved from, and we discussed this, it's evolved from a situation where the MLS was a unilateral offer of sub-agency,
Right.
where everybody worked for the seller. And
Right.
since everybody worked for the seller paid the commission. It was split between the brokers however they
Right.
deemed, acceptable. And that was the model for years.
Mm-hmm.
And because of, we won't go into the detail, but because of agency disclosure laws, started in California, swept across the country, the rules had to change.
Mm-hmm.
And so the rules did change, and
Right.
the MLS went from being a unilateral offer of sub-agency, which was a pillar of MLS, to being an offer of compensation, which became a pillar of MLS. But you know what? This kind of spoiled people, because as long as they were getting compensated, as long as people working with buyers were being compensated through the transaction through the seller side, they didn't have to get a buyer contract.
Correct. Right. And no, and so, just exploding head emoji moment, one of the, because remember, I told you I started managing in 1989-ish. actually kind of late 88 into 89. And I was living through that change from sub-agency to agency representation. And as I've shared with you in the past, we had a situation where all of a sudden sellers were being told that hold the phone, the buyer that's showing the agent that's bringing this buyer to your property to sell it is not working for you. And sub-agency has gone away. And I can't tell you how many times I saw offers of $1, I saw offers of $50, blah, blah. I saw all of that because I was managing in those days. So also I'm having not only to deal with it on my own level, but I'm having to now train my agents. And we had sellers that said, but I'm not paying that buyer's agent. They don't work for me anyway. And you know what I always asked? I've shared this with you before. I ask the question of the seller and often the listing agent, seller, did you know that they worked for you before? Did you know that the way real estate worked was sub-agency? Were you aware of that? And you know what the answer was unilaterally? No, because they did not know that that agent that was bringing a buyer through the house to sell it worked for them under the listing agent as a sub-agent. And so it just kind of blew my mind. Like, you never knew that anyway. What's the difference here? Compensation doesn't drive relationship, doesn't drive agency. It's about the relationship and client versus customer and all that. It just drove me nuts. And it was, I'm not going to tell you, it was a lot of fun. It was very painful to have to explain to the sellers and the buyers that this is how this worked. Even to the point of having to explain to buyers that buyers agents, that they had to make sure that they kept confidential what the buyer was telling them. And I remember this one trainer, don't remember his name. I think his first name was Tim, but this goes back decades. And he used to explain it, that if you're telling the other side of the transaction, something that if your client were standing next to you that they considered confidential, if you shared that with the other side of the transaction and your client would be upset with you, then that's a violation.
Yeah, so we're trying to make this as easy as we can, right? Because this can get very complex.
Oh yes, I know. I'm trying, Saul, but I get passionate.
So MLS, first of all, I'm an advocate for MLS, and I know you are as well.
As well.
I think that MLS is one of the greatest things that's ever been invented. It's created the most robust marketplace, the ability to market real estate. Now, real estate's not liquid, but it's very marketable. And one of the reasons it's very, and our MLS is the envy of the world, all over the world. And you know, there's people would like to have an MLS, would like to have the capability to sell real estate the way we can do it, where we have competitors that cooperate with one another.
And consumer accessibility, Saul.
Exactly. It's a great benefit. So, but what makes it work? And that is the ability for commissions to flow, the ability for dollars to flow. That's what the crux of making this work. And up until the 90s, the way that the commissions were able to flow was through a model that involved sub-agency.
Mm-hmm.
Because of agency disclosure laws, that changed, that created issues, the disclosures did. And so we had to come up with, the National Association of Realtors had to come up with, for their model, something that eliminated the liability under the old sub-agency rules, but still allowed commissions to flow.
Oh, yes, right.
And what was created was an offer of compensation, which we've been teaching to people since the 90s, right, that there's 3 pillars of MLS. And one of those pillars is it's an offer. What's the value of MLS? Well, it's an offer of compensation. You can show a buyer a property and not be afraid that someone's going to steal your client, that there's an offer of compensation there. And so that's worked for years. That's what's being challenged now, is that offer of compensation, which was brought about for good reason. And now it's being challenged. Whether or not it's being challenged for good reason or not, that's up to the jury to decide at some point. But that's what's being challenged. So if you're a real estate broker today, you have to understand, if you're sitting on a board of directors of an MLS or an association of realtors, you have to understand that there's potential liability for you, for your organizations, for the past. These lawsuits are covered. This lawsuit covers from like 2015 to 2019. 2019 or 2020.
Right.
Right. So it's that period of time. There's damages, and they could add up into the billions of hundreds of billions of dollars, some people say.
Mm-hmm.
And what can you do to mitigate
Mitigate the
future
problem.
potential
Yeah.
liability?
Right.
And we believe that one of the things that you can do is be more open about your negotiation of commission on the buy side.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you do that is with buyer broker contracts. So learn, begin now. And I know people have resisted it. And one of the reasons they resist it is they say, well, nobody else is using them.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And so, but start paying attention to this, because this might be your salvation. Number one, it'll make sure you get compensated. And number two, it might help relieve you of a little bit of liability.
Mm-hmm.
So start paying attention to that. And what a great time to introduce a buyer broker contract, because you can then explain the fact that there's litigation, why there's litigation, why you're using that contract. If other agents aren't using buyer broker contracts, they don't know what's going on. They just don't understand. So now this information is a differentiator for people who are practicing real estate. Use your agency disclosure, use the fact that there is litigation as a tool to be able to convince buyers that it's in their best interest to sign a buyer broker agreement with you.
Right. You know, the fiduciary relationship, client versus customer. And, you know, because I've been an educator for a very long time. And one of the things that I've noticed is moving forward, I'm seeing more and more when I'm standing in front of a class, that I'm seeing more hands go up when I ask the question, are you getting buyer broker agreements? I'm seeing an improvement there, but it's not what it should be. And at some level, it comes down to education and having an understanding of why it matters. And then what ends up coming up, and this is something we didn't talk to preliminarily, but the issue of lending and how do you structure that, and VA lenders not allowing a VA borrower to pay a buyer broker commission. And I think that within all of this, and help me with this, because this is truly a question for you, that I see that the lending industry also needs to change at some level. What are your thoughts there?
No, absolutely. And when there are mandates, however they come about, maybe through litigation, it's going to change. They're not going to stop making loans, right? We're going to figure out ways to make this work. Now, we know, and to go back to your point about when agents, when the MLS changed from an offer of sub-agency to compensation,
Yes.
you had this pushback where sellers, uneducated, ignorant of exactly what was going on, would say, well, I'm not, if they're represented, let them get the commission from the other side, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can, and we know that really what pays the commission is not the buyer and not the seller, it's the transaction.
Correct. Through
Which,
the
of course, the
transaction.
buyer has to go out and get the loan
Mhm.
funds the commissions. And so, right, and so that's an education process. But as we kind of look at this now, you can, in your buyer broker contract, you can lay out the way that it works and the fact that it's going to happen through the transaction, no different than the way it happens now. And everybody's going to get compensated, and it doesn't cross any lender lines.
Correct.
If in fact something happens and there's litigation that changes everything, I guarantee you we're going to come up with ways to make sure people can still borrow money to buy real estate.
Correct. And you know, I love what you're saying. So one of the things, to go back in lots of history ago, one of the things I remember, a former Fed chairman, and I'm not going to mention the name, but it was the only time I ever heard anyone say it out loud in a this is years ago, where and this is a really important thing for people to remember, all the people to remember. The real estate industry and the process of buying and selling homes is fundamentally important to the national economy. Because I'm that person. Every house I bought, save one, was horrible. In fact, the first house I ever bought, most people wouldn't have bought it because it was so bad. So when I bought the house I'm in now, I was on a first name basis with everyone in all of those, whether it was Lowe's or Home Depot. They all knew me, and I was very smart. Get there at 6 a.m. when they opened, but I was there. And so when you realize the importance of the real estate industry as a whole, And what happens to people's lives when they're able to buy that first home and do that modification and make it their own? Or what happens when that seller sells their home and they're able, maybe I was just having a conversation earlier today with someone who's in the reverse mortgage space, and that seller who's been in that home, raised their family there, has the ability to sell that home and have enough money to downsize and buy a home that's better for them at their stage of life. That's profoundly important. And we have to, I'm an advocate for MLSs, I'm an advocate for associations of realtors. I just wish that more people understood the 35,000-foot view of understanding how important the process of home sales and lending is to our national economy.
Well, you're absolutely. And so people are going to continue, no matter what
No
happens,
matter what.
people are still going to buy and sell real estate. And it's the foundation, it's the American dream, it's the foundation of wealth building and all these things that we
All
know
of those
about it.
things, yes.
And it's going to continue. Now, it might not continue transactionally the way that it's been done for years. That's okay. We've been through these changes before. But what
No
a great
question.
opportunity, if
Yeah.
you are a real estate agent, if you are a real estate broker, to now pay attention to these things, because there is potential for dramatic change. And even if nothing changes, you got something to talk about that nobody else can talk about. And being able to demonstrate expertise about your industry and about your business builds trust and confidence, and trust and confidence leads to contracts. And so why wouldn't you pay attention to this?
Which takes me right to the next place as an educator, which is everybody has to be paying attention. My mantra in almost everything I've been teaching over the last 4, 5, or 6 years, even all through pandemic, was you must be a student of your industry now more probably than ever before. Technology has created a flat space in my mind. There's an equality across the world. And I teach global real estate, so I talk about that. And there have been people that have said that we need to be more like Europe, and they don't have agency respect for the most part. They don't have agency protections. There is, you get paid by the buyer, you get paid by the seller. Compensations are different no matter where you are in the world.
It's not a fair comparison.
No, it's not. That's my point.
No, I know. You look at it. How easily is property sold there? How frequently does it turn? It doesn't work anywhere near the way it works here.
No.
And
You spoke to this again. The United States of America provides somebody to create I don't want to say wealth, but security through real estate that frankly doesn't exist. When I do what I do for international stuff, there are countries that when you look at their home ownership rates, they're not nearly what ours are. There are certain countries, they're more rental countries, broad basing 35,000 feet, than there are home sales. You also have in some countries being able to prove that you actually own the house. Any kind of title representation, title protections. You also have to understand that financing, lending is profoundly different. So comparing, it's not even apples and oranges. It's closer to apples and maybe tuna fish. I mean, it's that far different.
The system that we have for buying and selling real estate and financing real estate in this country is the envy of the world.
Correct.
More people in this country have the opportunity. It's not perfect by any means, but more people in this country have an opportunity to buy real estate, to own where they live, than in any other country in the world. And so if you're going to try to change this, think hard about what you're doing.
What the impact is going to be economically.
And what the unintended consequences can be from this.
Right.
Now let's go back to our agent in the field, right?
Yes.
People that are listing and selling. This lawsuit is major. And if the industry wins, learning about it isn't going to hurt you. You can actually use it to help you sell more real estate as opposed to your competitors. And if the industry doesn't win, you're going to be better prepared to handle the new paradigm of real estate sales.
Well, I'm going to speak to that, because when you go back to the days of 17% interest rates, people still sold houses. And I think I want to say this is my 8th adjustment in the industry. How many times have you dealt with it? I've got 8.
Yeah, since 1972, right? So a long time. I forget.
I think you have closer to 10 or 12. I've only got 8, but that's still a lot. And you
Yeah,
know what? Houses still sold, people still adjusted because, as you said, it's still the American dream. People still want to own a home, and that's not going to change. What I see, if I see a personal impact, and it comes from me being an educator, I wish that as an industry we did. I don't want to say it this way. I want to say it that the people that are in the industry day to day, operating out there selling homes, care more about how vital being a researcher is, staying ahead of the curve, paying attention to the industry, and being more educated is. And I think it's now more than it's ever been before in my
no,
career.
absolutely. But you make another interesting point here, and that is that we believe home ownership is a value. There
Absolutely.
are a lot of people that don't believe that.
Mm-hmm,
And so there is a direct assault on private property rights in this
mm-hmm,
country.
mm-hmm,
And one of the things that helps us maintain private property rights and makes real estate a reality for more people is the National Association of Realtors and RPAC.
mm-hmm.
And so I think RPAC is more relevant and more vital and more important today than it's ever been, because not everybody feels about this the way we do. And the point you were
Mm-hmm.
getting to, we kind of, is that a lot of people that sell real estate today are spoiled.
Mm-hmm.
They've never sold real estate in a marketplace where it wasn't this marketplace, where we had close to free money,
Mm-hmm.
where it was a seller's market,
No question, no question.
right?
You're speaking to something I talk about almost every class I've taught in the last 2 or 3 years. Wherever I am, whether it's on Zoom or personally, I ask the question, how many people in this room have been in the business 10 years or less? And when I look at those numbers, it ends up being roughly 60 to 65%, pretty much across the board, sometimes a little less. So when you look at, see, let's just take the 200 people that were in one of my recent classes, and I asked that question. And if 60% of those folks have been in the business 10 years or less, they've never seen anything other than an upwardly trending market. They have never had to have those conversations with Mr. and Mrs. Seller. Hey, understand that just because the guy down the street 6 months ago got this number doesn't mean you're going to get more than that now, because here's what the market has done. And then speaking to buyers, when I think I told you this once before, when I bought my first home, I got a 9% 1-year adjustable rate mortgage, and I was really happy
Yeah,
because
because you
everything
got
else
in.
was 10, 11, 12, 13% at the time. So I'm going to go with this 9% 1 year. I'm good, because I felt I could get in. And that's another place where education is required, teaching the agent and educating the consumer on what does it mean? How do you adjust for this? Where does it go? And understanding to that, having that agent being able to say to that buyer, okay, interest rates might be 6% right now. I mean, come on, Saul, 9%. I mean,
Yeah, well, there's a lot of dynamic to that, right? Um, and most people haven't lived through having to finance any way but a conventional way.
correct, correct.
And so it's important. And but I think that we're finally getting to this place where, and I ask this question frequently, what's the role of a real estate broker? What's the role of a real estate agent in the future? What's the
Mm-hmm.
job description of a real estate broker? What's the job description of a real estate agent in the future? We can tell you what it is now, but what is it going to be 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now? And it's not going to be the same. And we've always said that really part of the value that comes from representing or being represented in a transaction by a real estate agent, by a real estate broker, is that they're your consultant. And
Yes,
so
a
the goal
trusted
really
advisor and a consultant. Yes,
is more consultative.
yes.
And so the more you know, the more you can consult, the more you can consult, the more value you bring to the buyer or seller. And that's how you're going to justify your compensation.
And even when you talk about consultancy, it's on so many levels. So I have you'll appreciate this because of your history. I have this sweetheart of a young couple, Navy guy, and his wife. He's he's out of the Navy, but he's now a contractor, still on ship. And you know what he said to me? We were first talking. I said to him, was when you deploying again, and do you have a new PCS? And he went like this. I've never heard anybody other than me understand what that means.
Permanent change of station?
Yes. And so I think that I live in San Diego County. How many bases do we have here? How many military members do we have here? It doesn't matter what it is. If you are taking the time to be educated about all components of who your consumer may be, you're going to struggle. I think. I mean,
Yeah.
I work very hard to stay ahead of the curve. But that's who I am. I still love the process of handing somebody the keys when they are a buyer. And I, when I work with my elderly clients, making sure they're safe and protected. But that requires time on my part. It requires me to take the time to be educated on whatever's going on around me and not just walk in and think I have all the answers, because you don't. And I think I'm an educator. That's a struggle for me, because I see too many agents and brokers not getting to the core of the need to be more educated. And the more educated we are, the better it's all going to be for all of us in our industry. When you read I said this just yesterday or day before yesterday in Nebraska. When you see that one of the class action suits says buyer's agents don't do much of anything anyway, so why should they? Blah, blah, blah. That's in writing.
No, that's it. That's part of it, and they've got research behind that, and they bring into that conversation the fact that you can find things on. There are these things that kind of change the role of an agent. We say how many used to be that the agent was the first point of contact.
Correct.
The agent is no longer the first point of contact. The internet is the first point of contact.
Correct.
Right. So there's all these things have changed over time, but we're back to this thing, the idea that many people today have never had to live through this. And so it's an anomaly where you put a sign in you don't even put a sign in, you tell people the property is available, you get 10 offers, they're all over the asking price, and buyers waive inspections and commissions. This is all stuff that's crazy to you and me, but that's not a normal market.
And it's also no longer the case. And that's that we talked about it a moment ago, where there are agents that have, again, been in the business under 10 years who don't know how to have that conversation with the seller, saying, you know what, it's not they don't even know. This is terrible. I'm sorry. They don't even know. Agents are not taking the time to understand what the market tells us. Is it a buyer's market? Is it a seller's market? Is it a neutral market? Where are the adjustments? How are things going? The last several classes, and I've done some lunch and learns recently, where I'm speaking to that very thing. Do you know what an absorption rate is? Do you understand what that means? Are you able to read the difference between a buyer's market, seller's market, neutral market, or changing market? Because if you don't, you're ill prepared to have the conversation.
Yep. So take this full circle, and we'll say we started by talking about this Moeller versus the National Association of Realtors, which is litigation, which is a piece of this bigger story that we're telling.
Right.
Right.
No question about it. And yet, I love what I do. I love my industry. Nothing gives me more joy than whether it's standing in front of a group of real estate agents as students and doing my best to help them be better at their job, or giving a young Navy couple their keys to a home. It is, there's nothing like it. And I'm grateful I'm in it. And but we've seen so much, Saul, you and I, so much more than so many others. And that's why I wanted to have another one of our fireside chats, buddy.
Well, that's always great. It's always fun to talk real estate with somebody who understands it. Right?
You're my friend. You're the best. I adore you. I appreciate you taking the time. I have a sneaky suspicion we might have to do this again, maybe in another month or two. And just if nothing more than if it's us in our own little way, helping to have the folks out there that watch this, that are in the industry, have a better understanding of what's happening in the industry, and maybe hopefully engage in better education and taking the time to be a learner, taking the time to be a researcher, then I think we've done our jobs. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I think if anybody's interested and they want to contact me, I'll send them any kind of documentation they want, send them links to things that they can find where they can learn more about these different things that are affecting them and will affect them today.
Well, I promise you, as I always do, everybody is going to have your contact information. And I'm just, I mean, I just adore you, Saul. I love talking to you. And we share so many things, whether it's be in New York or the Navy, or I love your pictures of when you were just a whole lot younger and cuter.
That was a long time ago.
As am I, a lot younger and cuter. Those days are gone, but I just appreciate you so much, my friend. And thank you for taking the time to chat with me. And I'll make sure that anybody watching has the ability to get in touch with you and have a chat with you if they have more questions or information. Does that sound okay with you?
That sounds great. Well, it's great talking to you. We'll talk soon.
My friend, much love.
Likewise.
Well, I hope you got a little bit more information, and I sincerely hope that within that information, you're more inspired to learn more things, pay attention to the business, see what's happening. Don't let things happen to you. Go out and find out what's going on. Saul is a very generous man with his time. He's very active in social media. You can follow him on Facebook and LinkedIn, and he's posting a lot about what's going on. It's April of 2023, and you just have to be paying attention more than ever before, I think. This is my 8th or 9th adjustment in the industry. Saul was trying to figure it out. I think he's 10 or 12 adjustments in the industry. There are benefits to having done this for a long time. But I think, two people hanging out that have known each other who are also students of the industry can be helpful. So I hope you enjoyed what we talked about. Saul is very, very generous with his time. You'll find within the video contact information for him. Please feel free to reach out. Please make sure you subscribe because there will be more for you. And also, if you have questions or comments for me, don't hesitate in any way to reach out. Please continue to pay attention because I've got more great stuff coming. See you again soon.